Alright, let's get into the sound breakdown. Oscillator A, we've got analog BD sine, and the same thing actually for oscillator B, with one important difference. Oscillator B is being affected by this sine fold, which is mapped to LFO4, which is set to sample and hold, with the smoothness turned all the way up. So we'll get to what that means in a second. But essentially, the basis of the sound is just two sine waves. And that's something that I took from the DX7, along with the shape of the envelopes, as we'll have a look at in a moment. The DX7 uses a lot of sine waves as its base shape for the presets. And the envelopes here, as you can see, don't have any curves in them at all. And I took that again from looking at the LFOs of the DX7, specifically from the DX7 V from Arturia. For some reason, none of the LFOs are curved. They're all straight lines. So I was inspired by that and included that in my envelopes as well. So envelope 1, you can just copy the settings down here. And then envelope 2 is very similar, just with an even slower attack and a longer decay. And the sustain, is set to 100%. And envelope 2 is mapped directly to the level of oscillator B. I did that because I didn't want oscillator A and oscillator B to be affected by the same envelope. I actually wanted oscillator B to come in slightly later. So first you hear one and then you hear the second one come in. And that has to do with the fact that I didn't want the oscillators to behave simultaneously. You can also see this in another example here with the fine tuning. This one is tuned down 5 and this one is tuned up 5. And again, that contributes to a more analog sound. And I'd suggest that to anyone who's making analog sounding presets. You don't want your oscillators to be set to the exact same settings. You want them to be slightly detuned, and in my case, I also wanted the envelopes to behave slightly differently. And you can hear that if I play one note. Well, actually, you can't now because oscillator 2 isn't engaged, but you will be able to hear that in a moment. So let me play you the sound with just oscillator A engaged right now. With the sine wave, it sounds like this. And then oscillator B, if I bring that in here with macro number 7, you're going to start to hear those upper harmonics creep in. Initially, I wanted to make this a completely FM sound, and it ended up having no FM in it. But I still wanted to retain those glassy upper harmonics, and I found a workaround in this preset by using this sine fold and then mapping the LFO to the sine fold level to create those moving glassy upper harmonics. And I think it sounds pretty good. By default, I set it to just be off because I like the way it sounds both ways, and I wanted to give producers the option to introduce those upper harmonics if they so desire. Next, we have the noise oscillator. I decided to use polar 2 just because it sounds cool, to be honest. By default, it's set at a very low level, but if I turn the macro up here, you'll be able to hear it more clearly. To me, it sounds like the howling wind, which I really, really like for this type of ambient, liminal, spaced out sound. I think it fits really, really well. Next, for the filter section here, you'll see in a second that this is actually a redundant filter. The main filter is this one over here that's cut at 403 hertz. So it's a low pass filter that's filtering out most of the upper harmonics. But this filter right here is used for what I like to call my special effect macro knob, which in this case is macro knob number 5, called filter sweep, which is mapped to a couple of different things. It's mapped to the resonance amount, the drive amount, and also to this LFO3, which controls the cutoff amount. This LFO is set to sample and hold, as you can see, with the smoothness turned all the way up. And so what this macro knob is now allowing me to do is to create a filter sweep, a resonant filter sweep, I should say. And this is what it sounds like. So let me turn it almost all the way up. So yeah, we've got this crazy resonant filter going on, and I just love the sound of resonant filters personally. I think they're fantastic. They add such a dreamy ambient vibe that I just adore. I think they're perfect for specific cases, and also they give you options sonically. You might want to start with the filter sweep turned all the way down and then introduce it, like in the second verse or in an outro. I love when presets have baked in textures. So that's why I wanted to do it. I just wanted another texture out of this preset. Because why not? The more the merrier. That's what they say, right? For the next macro, we've got glide, which is simply mapped to this portamento knob here. It's set to always. And by default, I set it pretty high because I thought it fit this style of preset quite well. So with it on, you'll hear the notes glide. But if I turn it down, they don't glide, which might work well for your song. So I wanted to have that option in there as well. But I quite like it when it glides into each chord. I think that's quite nice, so that's why I left it on. Here we have the macro for Oscillator B, which adds those upper harmonic textures. And finally we have the noise mapped to a macro knob. I love a good noise oscillator. In terms of the effects, you can really recreate this sound with 3 main effects. The first one being chorus. Again, you can copy the settings for yourself. The rate is set quite low, mix at 50%. Everything else is default, I'm pretty sure. The filter is set at MG low 18 with the cutoff at 403 hertz, so it's filtering out most of those upper harmonics. And the delay is set to normal, 251 milliseconds on each side, with the wetness set to 11%. So very, very small amount. It's just adding a slight stereo bounce. It's barely noticeable, but I think you notice it when it's gone. Moving on, I wanted to add a couple of more effects. Distortion for texture. I love this diode 2 distortion. I think it's fantastic. And what I love doing with distortion is setting the drive pretty high and then the mix low. So by default, it's mapped to this macro over here. By default, it's set to 0. But if I turn it up, you'll be able to hear that crunchy distortion. It adds that distorted, grungy warmth that might be convenient for some of you. And again, you can map all of these macro knobs in your song to make the sound evolve, make it interesting for the listener. That's something that I like to do. Next, we have a compressor. I added that simply for convenience sake. By default, it's set to 0, so you won't see any compression happening. But if we turn it up, it'll just, compress the sound. And that will allow you to have a little bit more control if the sound is too dynamic in your mix, obviously, right? I think it's just a nice thing to have as a convenience factor. Because maybe if you have this sound alone, you don't need any compression at all. But if you have a couple more things in the mix, you might need to tame it a little bit. Might be too dynamic. So that's why I added the compressor there. Just purely for mixing convenience. Next we have an equalizer. I'm cutting 4 dB at 225 Hertz. As you can probably tell, this is a very lower mid-range heavy sound. So I wanted to alleviate some of that. I felt like 225 was quite present in a lot of the patterns I found myself playing. So without it, it's very similar. It's just a little bit beefier. Next we have a reverb that is also not engaged, but you're welcome to engage it for an even more spaced out vibe. I cut out a lot of the highs here to go along with, the filtered out theme of this preset. Size is set at 45%. Everything else is default, I think. So if I turn up the reverb, this is what it sounds like. Get that beautiful decay. I think it would actually be cool to maybe start the sound off like this in a song and then bring it back and tame it. I don't know. You can use it however you like. But it's always good to have a nice little reverb option that matches the sound, I think. And finally, we have a utility plugin that is only there to make the sound mono, if you like. It's mapped to this mono knob here, mapped to the width, right? So the sound is stereo by default, but if you turn the mono knob all the way up, your sound's mono. And again, this is a mix thing, a convenience thing. You might have a lot of things in your mix. I don't know. And you might want to make the sound mono to fit it in a very specific spot in the stereo field. I personally love it when presets keep those things in mind, like compression and mono versus stereo, because then I don't have to, it's basically one less plugin that I have to add. I can just turn up one macro knob here and all of a sudden my sound's mono, or all of a sudden I have some compression. I can tame my sound. I don't have to be loading other plugins. So that's sort of just a kind thing that I appreciate when that sound designers do, to be honest. So I wanted to do that for myself and everyone else. Here's the matrix. You can copy all of this. It basically outlines everything that I explained. It's just, obviously labeled nicely in the matrix. Some of these CRVs are changed. And in this case, I only did that because sometimes it takes a lot of knob turning to actually hear an effect. So if you can't really hear the effect unless the knob is, 70 or 80%, I sometimes like to make the curve a little steeper so that you can hear the effect earlier. That's the only reason I changed some of these CRVs. It's purely for convenience. You don't have to do that. So I think that just about does it for the sound. I really enjoyed making this sound. It's going to be part of a larger preset pack that I release later on this month, full of these Liminal, DX7, R&B, Drake style, whatever you want to call them, sounds. Honestly, it's just sounds that inspire me, that fit this dark 4 a.m. vibe. It's been very gloomy in New York here. I'm sure all of you New Yorkers know. We've had quite the weather recently and quite a lot of fog. So that's what we're going through right now. So I wanted to kind of inject that into a couple of presets. I don't know. To me, this preset kind of sounds like headlights through fog. I've been seeing a lot of that, walking home late and riding the train. Just everything's just been through fog. And so I've been inspired to make a lot of presets that sound like this. Presets that we're maybe familiar with, but live in a liminal space or a different room or are hazy, have interesting textures. Those are my goals with these presets, to be honest, and I've been having a lot of fun making them. And I wanted to bring you guys along to hear the process of how I go about these presets, how I think about them. So I'd greatly appreciate your feedback in that sense. Let me know what you liked. Let me know if you have any ideas for sounds. Let me know if I can improve anything on my explanations. I'm just starting out, so please let me know. I appreciate all of you for watching. Thank you very, very much if you made it to the end. It means a lot to me. And I'll see you on the next one. I hope to do many, many more of these, basically for almost every preset I make. So yeah, thanks guys. Thank you for sincerely thank you for staying and watching the whole video. If you made it all the way, I appreciate you guys a lot, and I'll see you on the next one.